To have faith in God is not a stagnant state, it's a journey. As believers, we should grow in our knowledge of God and His Word. Walk with Alan Cutting and many other believers as we walk the believer's journey.
Aloha, and welcome again to the Believer's Journey. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank all of you who actually watch our program and share our program, and everyone who subscribes. I do want to thank all of our people who not just subscribe to our Believer's Journey, but also who give to us financially, who pray for us. I want to thank our sponsors, Smart Choice Benefits, Guerrero CPA, Guerrero Law, and Trade Show Displays. You can go to our website and see all that we do. You can see all who we promote. I do want to mention again, we have added a new ministry to the Believer's Journey in Moldova. It's a counseling ministry. Her name is Olga. She is our counselor. You can look on our website and find her. And this is just kind of exciting because now we actually have an official spot in Moldova. And this is kind of neat. Well, today I have with us Carl Caton. He is the president and the founder of Marriage Initiative. And I think you've been on our program 3-4 years ago.
Yes.
Some time ago, but I guess he's got some great things happening in his ministry. So we brought him here to talk about that. And our topic today is everything has its time. We're going to talk about Ecclesiastes chapter 3, 1-8. You know, the song that the Byrds sang back in 1969.
Right.
So anyway, Carl, hello.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you. Great to be on the program again. This is fun.
It's a blessing.
Yeah.
So tell us, what's going on with Marriage Initiative? What new things are happening? And what old things? Just share with our audience. We have a lot of new people, so.
Well, there's a lot of interesting things that are happening in the world of marriage right now. Marriage is obviously God's first institution, and even before He created the local church. And yet marriage has been a challenging topic in the United States specifically, and I know you have an international audience. But in the United States, it's been a challenging topic. But the Marriage Initiative, essentially, we serve marriage leaders. We say we help dynamic marriage leaders work together towards ambitious goals. There seems to be an emerging marriage movement. There is an emerging marriage movement among people who serve marriages across the entire spectrum of how we serve marriages. We serve leaders in 5 categories. Certainly content. So these are the authors, the people who create podcasts and write books, all the classic people that create content for marriages. We serve content leaders. We also serve community leaders. These are people who think about a particular piece of geography and they want to really make a tremendous difference in their community for strengthening marriages. So we serve teams in 30 cities across the United States that are thinking about a piece of geography and want to reduce divorce, but also increase the marriage rate in their community. We've always, from the beginning, we've served people in the counseling community. They're an important part of what God uses to strengthen marriages, and we've served the counseling communities in some unique ways. Certainly, we serve the church. These all start with C, right? So we serve church leaders. We've done that from the beginning. People who want to set up and run marriage ministries at churches. But the newest group of leaders that we're serving are what we're calling champions. These are people that work in the civic space or public policy space. So, for instance, in Texas, we have a brand new commission, the Texas Commission on Marriage and Family, which is tasked with the idea of how do we strengthen families and marriages across the great state of Texas. So we serve leaders in these 5 areas.
Now, when you say marriage leaders, these are all just the people who are basic leaders, but marriage is a part of what they work with.
Yep. Yeah. So they're serving marriages directly. So the authors who they write books for marriages, community leaders, counselors, church leaders, and certainly civic leaders.
So I do a lot of work in Moldova.
Yes.
So there's a couple there. They've been on our program a few times. Actually, he ran one of my programs one time.
Okay.
When we were in Hawaii. Radu and Luda Kukosh, and they work with Crew. Now, this is really interesting. Now, Campus Crusade typically is known for working with students, and now they have this global church where they're trying to get a lot of churches and home churches and things, especially in Moldova. And he and his wife several years ago decided to start off on their own in family ministry.
Yeah.
So, and it was really hard for them because not everybody was wanting to go that direction.
Yeah.
Either they were locked in where they liked, or their friends were there they were working with, or it's just a difficult area, family and so forth. And what he shared with me in Moldova is that marriages, the divorce rate was just at an all-time high. What happens is, and maybe this relates somewhat in the United States, but what he said was a lot of kids that grow up there, because the rate of pay for people is like about $300 a month for the city, maybe about $75 a month in the villages. A lot of people in villages, they'll grow their own food and trade. So that's, but because the children grow up without a parent, or sometimes both parents, they either grow up with one parent, so they have no idea what marriage really is, or they're shoved off to a grandparent,
right,
or aunt and uncle, or even an orphanage. And so when they become of age to be adults and they fall in love and get married, they're lost. And so within the first 3 years, the divorce rate is really, really high.
Right.
And so I don't know if the United States has a similar problem with like a single parenting, because I know I've heard a lot about I grew up in it with a single parent, and I had a hard time, really hard time when I first got married, and relationships and how does it work. And I just really didn't get it.
Right. Right. Well, you're exactly right. And that dynamic of young people growing up in fractured families is fairly consistent across, especially more developed countries. The research says that young people that grow up in these families, they see marriage as fragile and unreliable. And so they don't put a lot of faith in marriage. They don't trust marriage. And so, so they choose not to marry. They choose to go other routes like cohabitation. But if you look at the research, people that pursue cohabitation actually have a higher divorce rate than people that choose to marry as we traditionally have in the past. Yeah, so it's challenging. The culture reinforces the idea that cohabitation is a good thing, which it's not. But again, people that grow up in these families that they've never seen marriage done well, it's really hard for them to embrace it.
Yeah. I'm really pro-marriage. I really believe in it. I was telling you earlier that it's interesting when I go to Moldova and to Slovenia that they have me do marriage seminars. Yeah, which is weird for me. When they first asked me to do it years ago, I'm like, me? I think you'd be good at it. And so I have more of a, because I'm comical, I put more of a spin on it that makes it funny and, bring it back to reality in a way that's real and serious. But I've learned that marriage, from what I thought when I was younger, I thought, the man is the man, the woman's place is in the kitchen, in the home, and the guy mows the yard, and he's the only or final say. And that to me is just all wet. I mean, it's just terrible. But I learned it. It's not the way to go, and it's not what I believe, nor is it practice in my home anymore. But what do you have to say about something like that? Well,
marriage is impacted by realities, and the realities in the 1800s is that there was a survival nature to marriage, in that it was a way to be safe and provide and so forth. And then in the 1900s, and especially in the 1960s, there was these kind of traditional roles, like what you're talking about, traditional roles that people had in marriage, and that was rejected during at that time because of the feminist movement, and women were entering the workforce, so roles changed. And so today, marriage reflects the changes that are just naturally happening in culture. It's not that marriage is not still a good thing. It's just that marriage has to represent the changing nature of how people work and how they interact and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean that we're going to change the definition of marriage. We're not talking about that. The fundamentals of marriage are just as strong today as they've ever been. But there are, realities to how families provide and how they interact, which are important for respecting that today.
It's funny. My mom came to live with us almost 2 years ago. It's so hard. And, when she would come out to dinner and we'd eat, and my wife makes dinner, and all of a sudden I go and I clean the kitchen and wash the dishes. And my mom one time says, "So do you always wash the dishes?" "Every night." We both work equally.
Yeah, right.
So we both share equally.
So you're adapting to kind of these, changing nature of life and work and how it happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's all about honor.
It is. Yeah.
So, I need to honor her. She needs to honor me. And that's just something we learn to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So tell us more about Marriage Initiative. I heard, before we get there, I listened to a speech you did.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, you sound like you got cut off at the end.
It's been updated.
Okay.
I did get cut. The punchline was missing. And so it's been updated.
But I really got interested in this cycle you talked about,
right,
where you have marriage was strong for 50 years, and
mm-hmm.
then you had divorce strong for 50 years, and then marriage for 50, and it was like this up and down cycle,
right?
Historically,
right.
Talk about that. It really fascinated me.
Well, when people talk about marriage today, they put the context of that into their lived experience. So, Alan, for you and I, our entire lived experience has been in a world of declining marriage and of no-fault divorce. That's all we've ever known. That's our lived experience. Social scientists call this ontological security. So that's how we view marriage. But the problem is that perspective is very limited. It doesn't reflect historically what has happened in marriage over the last 200 years. And so let's talk about marriage over the last 200 years. From 1820 to 1870, marriage was on the rise. Marriage was very much in vogue and very much on the rise, very much a necessity of daily life. But then from 1870 to 1920, marriage was in steep decline. It was called the progressive era. It was the season of fierce discontent. And more than anything, women were uniformly angry with men because men were gambling too much. They were abandoning their responsibilities. They were drinking too much. Women were uniformly angry with men. But something unique happened, and that was World War I. And after 50 years of being angry with men, guess what? 4.5 million of those men signed up to fight for our freedom in World War I. And all of a sudden, culture shifted because women gained a new respect for men, or what they actually gained was a deeper insight about men, which is, yes, men can behave badly, but they can also act heroically. And so culture shifted radically. It was an unexpected cultural shift. And what it ushered in was the golden age of marriage, which went from 1920 to 1970. And you probably know this. Marriage peaked in 1946. It set all-time high records. But then after going through that 50-year period, then things began to change. We're going to talk about what's happening behind the scenes of what makes this happen. So from 1970 to 2020, marriage was in decline again. So 1820 to 1870, marriage is on the rise. 1870 to 1920, marriage is in steep decline. 1920 to 1970, marriage is rising again, setting records. 1970 to 2020, marriage is in decline. But what drives these fundamental changes is not culture. It's not the cultural narrative. It's not what movie stars say about marriage. What drives these 50-year periods is human longing. Human longing is the silent force beneath every cultural tide. The narrative is simply how we give it voice. And so let's unpack what there's two core human longings that relate specifically to marriage. And they are connection and autonomy. And these are very healthy elements of human longing. So autonomy is our desire for personal freedom. It's pursuing our own goals. And that's what we've been in since 1970. We've been in a season where people longed for autonomy. They wanted to break free of the traditional roles of marriage, and women wanted to explore new roles. And so it was a cultural era driven by autonomy. But autonomy leads to tremendous disconnection. And for the last 20 years, Alan, we've been talking about this growing sense of disconnection. We have felt disconnection. There was a book called Bowling Alone that talked about how disconnected we're becoming as a culture. And then through the 2010s through 2020s, there's all these rising deaths of despair. The Surgeon General indicates that we have a chronic time of loneliness, and so we become very, very lonely. And guess what happened in 2020? At our lowest moment, we found ourselves even more alone because the pandemic hit. The earth goes silent. We're separated from each other. I don't know if you remember those early images of grandparents locked away in nursing homes and behind plastic sheets, and couples were in lockdown in their homes. And at a moment when we were longing for connection, we found ourselves deeply alone. And Alan, this set off a reality and a reaction that I don't think we're fully recognizing, and we're not fully giving voice to that, is that there has been a return to connection, a new sense of human longing, desiring connection. We don't want to be independent anymore. We want to be interdependent. We don't want to go our own way. We want to be part of community. People are longing for a sense of shared purpose and community values. But more than anything, marriage brings the most profound form of connection we have with any other human being. And so I believe what has happened is we've had a cultural shift that we're not even giving voice to yet, which is that the culture has shifted back to a desire for connection, and marriage is the most unique way we connect to another person.
So 2020, now it's 25 years into it. So
yeah.
We're on a rise for marriage.
Right.
So can we expect that it'll go for another 45 years and we'll drop?
It could. Now, I think in reality, when you study cultural trends, there's thing called counter trends. Mm-hmm. So let me give an example of a counter trend. Is that when you talk to counselors right now, they say, "Well, my gosh, we're busier than ever. We're so booked. We're so heavily booked, like we've never been before." And it's not until you ask the question why that it becomes really evident what's going on. And when you ask why, counselors are so busy, and you immediately assume, well, it's because so many couples are in trouble. It's not that. It's because there is a renewed sense of longing for connection. And these couples, rather than going to a counselor 3 times and calling it quits, they're going to a counselor 10 and 12 and 15 and 20 times because they are more committed than ever to the relationship. So people look at these as counter trends, but they're actually a deeper explanation of what's happening. We won't really know. Cultural trends don't firm themselves up until you're about 10 years in. So 2030, we might be able to look back and go, yes, that's when it happened. 2020, these things take long periods of time to really form. But we could easily be headed towards a multi-decade renaissance of marriage. And that's a pretty powerful term to say renaissance, because there's not a lot of people that believe that there is a marriage renaissance happening. And why is it? It's because all of our lived experience is in a time of declining marriage. And when that's our perspective, it's really hard to embrace the idea that something's changed.
Yeah. A couple things. Now, the ministry has taken on a form internationally. Is this correct?
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, we're part of International Marriage Week, and International Marriage Week has expressions, and I believe in 28 countries. So we lead National Marriage Week in the United States, and so our goal this last year was to reach 11 million marriages through our messages that happen during February 7th through 14th every year. But different countries they celebrate marriage at different times of the year. In the Southern Hemisphere, a lot of times they celebrate it in the fall. A lot of countries in Northern Hemisphere celebrate in the spring, or especially around Valentine's Day. So yeah, it's a worldwide thing. Marriage differs in different countries. Alan, you talked about India. So if a country emphasizes individualism, that's autonomy. So individualism is an expression of personal autonomy. So most Western European countries, and certainly the United States, are deeply embedded in the idea of autonomy and expressive individualism. Mm-hmm. One of the problems with expressive individualism is it doesn't mesh well with marriage, because it's all about you and your choices and your personal freedom and you. That culture in America is about me, myself, and I. Mm-hmm. But there's cultures like in India, and in Indian cultures, they have the opposite cultural theme, which is collectivism, or some people call it mutualism. So individualism is the polar opposite of collectivism. So in countries that emphasize collectivism, marriage is a really good fit for that worldview. And in fact, in the United States, Indian American marriages in the United States thrive because their culture still embraces collectivism. Our grandkids go to a school that has a very, very high representation of Indian American families. And picking up kids at school is a cultural experience. Parents, grandparents, the whole family goes and they pick up the kids, and they walk them home. And that's part of their cultural experience. So depending on, when you talk about internationally, if the country emphasizes mutualism or collectivism, then marriage is very likely thriving or much more aligned with that belief system. And so in America, it's not so much that we have a problem with marriage. It's just that we're so deeply rooted in individual expressive individualism. It's just not compatible.
Of course, I kind of align that with people are basically selfish.
Exactly.
And I want what I want. And, and in my view of things, I look at marriage as, you're a partnership. We are one, but we are two. We are one in marriage and in it as a couple. And yet individually, we have our individuality.
Right.
I do what I do, and you do what you do, but we also do what we do, never to hurt or ridicule the opposite. Mm-hmm. But we do things that basically bring us together, even though like my wife, she sings in the choir. Okay. And I don't sing in the choir. Okay. So she leaves early Saturday, early Sunday morning. And so we drive separately and all that. But that's her individuality. Mm-hmm. And that's what basically makes her happy, which is great at home because she's happy.
Yeah.
And when she's feeling down, when she goes to sing, she comes back happy. I mean, it makes it nice at home.
Right.
Where I do other things, I teach and so forth, and I do a lot of it on my own rather than with her. And so we have this separateness,
right?
But we have it together in joining as a couple because we complement each other in that.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a balance in that. And the reason why, for instance, when culture emphasizes connection, then and then you'll have like a 50-year run where it's all about connection and family, but too much connection can be suffocating, and that's when people begin longing for autonomy again. So what you're talking about, mastering in your marriage is a really healthy thing, is that there's a balance in this, right? We need to have a sense of personal agency over our lives, and we need to be able to be our own individuals, and we need to work on ourselves individually. Ron Deal, who's a great author with Family Life, he's written so many books, especially for blended families. He's just written a book called The Mindful Marriage. And that book talks about how you as a part of the marriage, you need to be responsible for yourself and and bringing your best healthy self to the marriage. It's focusing on how you as an individual can be healthy. And so it's important that we be individually healthy, but also then there's the marriage where we're together. And so we need to be focusing on us individually, but also on us together. And that's a healthy balance. Sounds like y'all are figuring that out.
Well, and it's funny because we have a business together. We sell flags and banners and promotional products and things. And so we work together. However, I make sure she has an office far from me. We have intercom,
right? Yeah,
but we don't sit in the same room together all day long.
Yeah,
we sit in separate rooms,
right?
And we'll pass by through the day.
Yeah,
but I think if we sat in the same room, it would be terrible because we see each other all evening, and
right.
So that makes it easier.
So you're finding a good balance, and that's a really healthy thing. And a lot of couples are that way. A lot of couples, they say opposites attract. And my wife, Kelly, and I, we've been married for 42 years. We're very much alike in a lot of ways, and we're very different in other ways. And, but we respect the ways that we're different, and we kind of honor the way that we're different, just like what you're saying. That really works well.
I know that something I told my wife before we ever got married, I said, I don't believe in the fact that the husband is the boss, and the wife has to obey and do everything he says. And I said, I totally do not believe. She kind of agreed with that, but she was brought up being treated like she had to ask for obedience and be on her knees and all that, subservient type of lifestyle. And I don't like it, and I don't do that. So I think God made us in a way that, he made the woman so that she is a person that completes me, and I'm a person that completes her. We're not one over the other, but we complete each other in helping one another live and grow. And so that's my take on marriage and couples. And I think she agrees with that, but she has a hard time because of her past being treated like she had to ask for everything, that she ever wanted in life.
Yeah. Well, truly, we're better together as a couple. And especially when one of the things that I feel like is most important for a couple is that their personal calling, their mission in life we have great alignment for that. I think that's really, really important, is that marriage is a partnership in purpose. And that's our theme for National Marriage Week in 2026, is that marriage can be a profound partnership in purpose, is that you bring each of the gifts that you each have to this together. For Kelly and I, it was the most significant element of our marriage in terms of partnership has been to bring our family back to faith. And so my parents, my dad was not a believer. My mom struggled in her belief, and Kelly, her family had some challenges related to this as well. But we saw our life together as a couple is raising these two kids that came to know the Lord and developed a really strong faith. And so we, when we talked about it, we said we had to be honest about the past, right? Because those were realities, but we needed to be diligent in the present and hopeful of the future. And that has been a central theme to our marriage. It's an important part of our partnership is this family returning to a healthy and strong faith. So we're better together, and we each bring strengths that make the marriage stronger.
Yeah, and I think that that's something really to identify, especially in the beginning part of your marriage. And if it's not the beginning anymore, you need to, and you haven't done that, you need to identify that, because that's what really makes it, full. It's interesting. My dad used to my stepmother, every time she'd say something, he would always say, "Yes, dear." But it got to be at a point where he was almost mocking her, "Yes, dear."
Yeah.
And she got upset, and I think that we need to be careful, because we do that. It's very condescending.
Yeah. Right.
To do that. And I think that the whole idea, I take after the teaching after Gary Smalley. I don't know. It's all about honoring, you honor your spouse. And we tend to live in a dishonoring mode in our communities, our country, and we do bring it home with us. And what we used to do when we first dated, we honored. But when we get married, at least on the guy's side, we tend to stop honoring, and then that causes a reaction on the opposite side.
Right. Yeah. You're exactly right. Yeah. We at the Marriage Initiative, one of our one of our insider secrets is that we only produce and put out things, especially on social media, that's honoring. There's a lot of things on social media that's, intended to be funny, but a lot of times it represents couples being dishonoring towards each other. And so our social media folks always try to put out things that present this as an honoring perspective.
Yeah, because when you're dishonoring, you kill the other person's spirit.
Right, you do.
And that, what does that lead to? It leads to a very unhealthy and almost non-existent marriage.
Right. Yeah. So true. Yeah.
Tell us more about Marriage Initiative. What are you doing? It's just bubbling over.
Yeah, I just think, again, as I mentioned at the top, is that we're seeing this emerging marriage movement. We're seeing people across the country that God is calling to this work, and more churches are embracing their unique role in strengthening marriages. From the very beginning, we've placed a big emphasis that the local church is the answer to strengthening marriages. And because there's marriages in every church, and marriage is the first institution. And so a big part of our work has always been to equip people in the local church to start and build marriage ministries, or marriage disciple, if you prefer to call it that way, marriage discipleship, to raise up teams in local churches that support the marriages in that church. We started in San Antonio right here, and in the Alamo City, or the Mission City. And it's a big place. There's 400,000 marriages in San Antonio. Research indicates that 20% of those marriages are struggling. It's 80,000 struggling marriages, and 9,000 couples file for divorce in San Antonio each year. It's a massive and overwhelming problem. So we don't run programs. We build up leaders. We build up leaders in local churches who use the connections and relationships that they have in their local church, and they interact with those authors, those content leaders, those authors, and they bring in the resources that are necessary so that they can lead marriage discipleship or marriage ministries in local churches. And so we equip people in local churches to do that. And there's lots of great ministries. You mentioned Cru, and Cru has a ministry called Family Life, and Family Life, creates Weekend to Remember and all sorts of resources around marriage. They're a great source for resources. A couple of new things, is Reengage. Reengage is happening in churches all over the country. It's a great way to come alongside couples. Grace Marriage is another really fantastic resource that's finding its way into churches all around the country. It's a really tremendous resource. So we have identified over 400 authors, Alan, who have created over 2,000 resources for marriage. It is amazing how much help and hope there is for couples. And every one of these resources seems to be having a transformative effect. So that's kind of an overwhelming thought for a church leader, right? So when they interact with us, we talk to the church and help them build a strategy and a plan for how they're going to serve marriages. We identify the right resources for them. We help their leaders get trained in the use of these resources. And then we support the rollout of the resources in that local church. That's a great way to strengthen marriages in any community, in any country in the world.
That's amazing. That's really neat. Now, for our audience, on our screen going by, you can find a phone number there, and as well as a website for Marriage Initiative if you want to look into that, see what they do. And if you have any questions, couldn't find the email, but I'm sure it's there. I'm going to go to contact and contact them. But what about areas that want to start something? They don't know what to do. Do you have resources to help? Let's say, for example, in Moldova or in Slovenia, that they want to really work with this marriage initiative, but don't know where to start.
We absolutely do. We have a special website that's different from our main website. It's called marriageresources.org. That's plural, marriageresources.org. And on that site, we have over 800 resources listed there. Everything you can imagine is on this website, and it's curated and laid out so that you can find things easily. And then also, in addition to that, on that website, we have a video series, a YouTube series called Up Close and Personal. So if you find a resource that you like and you want to know more about the author, you get to meet them up close and personal, and by watching the YouTube video, and you can find all sorts of resources. What's really interesting, Alan, is that a culture is shifting, and as culture is shifting in how people are engaging with resources, people are using multiple levels of criteria and searching for resources. They're not just searching, marriage help. They're searching for very specific answers to an immediate and pressing problem. That's what most people use the internet for. Is they have a unique problem that they're dealing with, and they get out and they Google this problem. But they're getting really, really specialized in how they're searching for answers. They're not looking for a 12-hour course. They're looking for a solution to an immediate and pressing problem. And our marriageresources.org website will help you identify those resources and connect you to those authors and their websites and their books, wherever they're sold. And again, a YouTube video that helps you get to meet them and get to know them.
That's really cool. I like that. Well, again, you can, and if you want to leave a comment down below in our description area, or if you want to contact anybody, you can contact our ministry or leave a comment, or you have the phone number or website there. You can look that up and go with it. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. So this has been really informative. I really enjoy all that you do. I really believe it. Of course, it's interesting that they have these groups have me doing marriage.
Exactly.
Seminars.
You're being called into this area, and you're speaking well into it.
Believe me, it's because I've felt so inadequate from my past that I had a hard time stepping into this. But
I'm right there with you, Alan. There's times that I think this guy leads the marriage initiative, me, and I'm making this rookie mistake in my own marriage. And there's times where we all feel that way. I'm no marriage expert by far, but I'm passionate about marriage and about helping connect people to the right resources to help them.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Let's move our topic. Everything has its time. Now, it's interesting. Ecclesiastes is, if you don't know what the book of Ecclesiastes is all about, it's actually Solomon writes this book. It's autobiography almost, where he's talking about, he's searching for the highest good. What is the highest good? Is it women? Is it money? Is it health? I mean, he just goes through all this thing, and he's not just writing about it. He's actually participating in this stuff. Well, the third chapter is really cool because he writes something that, like I said earlier, the birds saying, turn, turn, turn. And so I want to read this and we'll talk about it. So Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, it says, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, and a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace." So there's a scripture you threw at me.
I think it's relevant to explaining what's happening in this emerging marriage renaissance. That's a pretty ambitious statement, but I think it's instructive to us, and I think it's important to us to consider how we're reacting to what's happening in culture from this perspective. And can we unpack that?
Sure.
Yeah. So verse 1 again. This is a verse that people often remember. There is to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven, and that is resonated throughout the entire chapter of this. But I want to focus on two verses. I want to focus on verse 5 and also verse 7. In verse 5, as you mentioned, Alan, it said a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. And when you read the commentaries on this, what you learn is that God allows times or seasons of kind of the undoing of things, the casting away of stones. He allows these things to happen. But then again, there's times that follow when we are gathering stones together. So I want to put that in the context of what we've seen. So in the from 1970 to 2020 was the unveiling of the no-fault divorce era. It was kind of the undoing of marriage. It was kind of the undoing or the casting away stones. In other words, we set this great institution that God created aside. God, I guess, allowed that to happen, right? In culturally, especially in the United States, we began to cast marriage aside, and marriage went through a really hard season, a really dark season. There was a tremendous amount of pain around marriage because of, as you mentioned, young people that grew up in homes that didn't have two-parent families. That began to lose trust in marriage. There was a lot of personal and cultural pain around marriage. So in the United States, we had this generation-long debate over what marriage is. What is the definition of marriage that culminated in this Supreme Court decision that we're not happy with, but it is a reality. And so there was this undoing of things. But when all of our lived experience, going back to what I said earlier, when all of our lived experience is in the time of undoing, it's natural for us as human beings to have a hard time embracing that God could be bringing this back together. And I want to give you a case study on this. So when the pandemic hit, Alan, we began to hear news reports predicting a divorce tsunami. A divorce tsunami was going to impact our country, and there was going to be this great unraveling of marriages all over the country. And so we were bracing ourselves for the worst. We're like, oh my gosh, what do we need to do in our communities to be prepared for this divorce tsunami? And in San Antonio specifically, our team was on the ground like, what are we going to do when this divorce tsunami hit? It never came. In fact, the opposite happened. When we reviewed the divorce data for 2023, divorce fell by 8.5%. It was so surprising, we didn't even report it as much as we wanted to report it. And then in 2024, we said, well, it's going to snap back. It's going to snap back. We're going to have a terrible year. Divorce fell by 15%. Totally unprecedented. And it was the first time that I began to realize something different is going on. But Alan, I had the most unique experience when I began to share this information with people, because I would be talking to someone about what we're seeing, and I would say, wow, divorce is down by 8.5%, and then following year by 15%. And I watched as people struggled with that information. Now, you would think, Alan, that people would go, wow, that's great news. I'm so excited to hear it. In 50 conversations, Alan, not one person was willing to accept that it wasn't related to something else. And so what would happen in all those conversations is I would see people's wheels start turning, and they'd say, well, it's probably because of this. And I'd say, no, that's not happening. Well, it's probably because of this, this, or this. No, those things are not happening. And they were unable to accept that maybe God is moving. And so when you talk about a time to gather stones together, maybe God is moving. Maybe God is redeeming and restoring marriages. Maybe there is an emerging marriage renaissance. But because of our human nature, because of our lived experience is having seen nothing but declining marriage, it leaves us feeling disoriented. And it leaves us with this inner tension of like, wow, I don't understand this. And so Ecclesiastes, think about all these other examples from the Bible. What was the expectation of the disciples about what Jesus would be and what he would do? It didn't turn out as they thought, right?
Right.
And we have all these examples of expectations that people had. It's because it was their lived experience. I wanted to look at my notes on a couple of other things. What did the religious leaders think that Jesus would do? What did the disciples think he would do? What about reaching the Gentiles? That was never part of their lived experience, right? And so they weren't expecting God to do what he did. And I think there is a little bit of a parallel to that today, is that no one is expecting there's going to be a marriage renaissance, because we've seen nothing but marriage destruction. So it's hard for us to accept that. Ecclesiastes, I think, speaks to us. Hey, there's a time and a season for everything. And in fact, if you look at history now, if you go really back in history, hey, this has been on 50-year trends now for 200 years. And if you go back to a surprising moment in history was 1889. Think about how long ago, 1889. In 1889, for the first time, the United States led the world in divorce. And in the year 1890 to 1900, divorce quadrupled in our country. And it would have been easy for people who had lived through that entire season to believe that marriage could never turn around. There could never be a return to marriage. But what happened is that marriage came back, and we had the golden age of marriage. But it was because of all of their lived experience that they were not anticipating it. And so Ecclesiastes reminds us, to everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. Let's don't discount what our God can do.
Yeah.
If God decides to bring a renaissance of marriage back, he will, with or without us, right? And I feel like right now is God calling us to get on board. And it's really, there's another verse, there's two great verses in here that speak to our unique opportunity. And the second one is verse 7, a time to rend and a time to sow. But this is what's most important, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Alan, in the Christian community, we have lived through decades of silence where people in positions of leadership were afraid to speak up on marriage. I spoke in 2017, I spoke to some very, very high level political leaders at the Capitol. And they said, we don't say the M word because it's so controversial. And a lot of times in churches, pastors are reluctant to speak on the M word, marriage. Why? Because there's so much personal and cultural pain. There's a time to be silent and there's a time to speak. Alan, this is the most remarkable moment in time in our lifetimes related to marriage. Culture is longing for connection. People are longing to understand how they can be successfully married. And if we in the marriage movement don't speak into this, it's a time to speak. If we don't speak into it, somebody else is going to define marriage. And let me give an example. Let's use a cultural example. This cultural thing in the United States called baby daddy. Okay. How in the world did that ever take root?
I only hear it on TV.
Well, I did a little research on it, and there was a movie star, somebody in the entertainment world that was talking about having a child out of wedlock, and it's speculated there was a sense of shame around that. So they decided to handle it with humor. So they said, well, he's my baby daddy. Okay. They defined culture. And now Christians talk about having a baby daddy. And so if we don't, at a moment in time in culture, if according to Ecclesiastes 3:7, if we don't take this opportunity to speak, someone will. Someone is going to define the way forward on marriage. It can either be Christians, pastors, people that care deeply about marriage, or it can be people in sports and entertainment. And so it's our time to speak.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I think that too often we're silent. It's interesting. I mentioned real quick because I want to qualify what I said about Ecclesiastes and Solomon, because at the end of the book, he does, because he's searching for the highest good, he does say God is the highest good.
Right.
He does qualify his search to finding out what is bad, but he speaks up, hey, God is the highest good. And I think that you're right. I think that, we all complain about things in our culture, in our history that we've let happen or let happen. We just say came about. For example, in science, we look at evolution. So in the 1950s, when things got put into our science books, and in the 1960s, as things were taken out, we were silent.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you said, somebody's going to speak up. And so that part of the world spoke up and took over, and we were just silent.
Right.
So you're right.
And I think it's important to note that we're all leaders. Okay. Mm-hmm. So someone that's listening to this might say, well, I'm not a cultural leader. I'm not a community leader. Well, you're the leader of your family.
Yeah.
And so it's time for you to speak up about your marriage. And I think we've bought into this cultural idea. Even Christians have bought into this cultural idea of speaking negatively about their marriage. Somebody will say, oh, great, you've been married, for 35 years. Yeah, I've still got the old ball and chain. That's a very negative way to talk about your marriage. We need to speak aspirationally about our marriage. We need to speak honestly about it, but we need to speak aspirationally. I need to talk about my marriage to my wife in ways that are aspirational. I need to communicate how much I love being married to her and why I like being married to her and why she's outside of my relationship with God. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And what are all of her best attributes? And what do I appreciate most about her? Marriage is more caught than taught. And the way that the people in your life talk about their marriages and the way your parents talk about their marriage says a lot to how you will embrace marriage or not. And if what they see is negativity around marriage, if you're not taking this opportunity to speak positively about marriage, don't be surprised if people in your family don't embrace marriage.
Yeah.
This is our time to speak.
Yeah. And I think we're at least in the era that I've been alive, it seems like a lot of people more and more have, now I don't know about the last few years, but during a period of time during the 80s and 90s, people were all about God wants me to be happy. And that gives them the out to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Because if they're not happy, then it's okay to divorce because God wants them to be happy. So it's okay to divorce because then they'll be happy. So it's all about happiness, not about godliness.
Mm.
And I think that's why I said in the very beginning, it's about selfishness.
It is
selfish. And I think that's where we start plugging in those things to build our selfishness.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's a condition of the human heart, right?
Yeah. People think, oh, well, I think basically people are basically good. Well, the Bible doesn't say that, and the heart is wicked. And I think that's basically true. You set somebody out there on their own and things become selfish.
Mm-hmm. Well, selfishness is part of the human condition, right? Mm-hmm. But when culture emphasizes individualism, it reinforces selfishness.
Right.
And it celebrates selfishness. And that's where selfishness then can run amok, is when culture gets behind it.
Yeah. And
culture has been behind it for 50 years.
Yeah. I was fortunate, even though I was brought up in a single parent home, when I was 16 and a half, I moved in with a pastor and his family. So the first time in my life, I got to really see what family was about. We sat at the table and prayed, or in the evenings when they set the kids down, Diana would go in, the mother would go into each child and talk with them, not just pray with them, but talk. And then she would come out. Then mom would go in and talk to them and goof off and then pray with them. So it was this relationship, and then they would take them out and do things, play basketball with a boy or go to shopping with the girls, something that connected them in that relationship that brought the whole family as a unit rather than something that's off all over the place. And today, as they're in their 80s and the kids now have kids, you can see the unit, they're all serving the Lord. Mm-hmm. And they're all got families and they're strong families. And I really believe that, you may not understand this, but I really believe the unit, the couple, as they bond and bring their children into that bond,
right,
really start creating an ongoing, development of home and family.
I would be interested to hear you talk about how much that impacted you and gave you a vision for what's possible relative. I mean, Alan, in your marriage, in your family, did you learn what you practiced in a textbook, or did you learn most of what you learned by seeing people operate in healthy ways?
Well, I think seeing what I saw in healthy ways really opened my eyes.
Yeah.
But because I had baggage,
Mm-hmm.
if you will, I had to go to textbooks.
Okay, right.
I had to, because I'm like, well, how do I change my behavior? Because even though I saw it and I thought, this is really cool, there were things inside me that just weren't going there. So I had to start reading and start seeing it. Somebody would go through this and they conquered it through the Lord and doing something else. And so I had to start thinking, well, let me start practicing this. But it was a combination.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think that's very accurate for many of us. And that was the same way for us. Kelly and I had a really amazing family in our life, and we watched them operate as a family, and we were like, we want that, but how do you get there? And that's when we went to the books. And I like to say that Dr. James Dobson helped us raise our family because I read a lot of his books on how to be married and how to raise your kids and so forth.
Yeah, I think that, and so I got to a point where my book reading changed into those type of Christian books rather than stories and nonfiction or fiction books. And, I stopped reading those and started reading more of the self-help Christian books that really helped me build my character. Mm-hmm. And so my wife and I are very different. She likes just to read. It doesn't matter what she reads. She just loves to read. But I'm real particular. And all because of those years did that, it helped change and influence my life.
Yeah.
And I had to think about when I was told things, like when I asked a question, I would answer questions very methodically and like guys do. They have to figure out how to solve problems. And I'd be hit. Hey, what's wrong with you? You're not talking like a real person here. You're just, so I had to think about the relationship and my own stuff.
Yeah.
And it isn't easy when you have a background that's influencing your emotions.
Right. Well, and now you're teaching others.
Yeah, which is kind of weird.
and I'm leading a marriage initiative, and it's still growing in my marriage as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and my wife and I, we're funny because we don't agree on a lot of things.
Sure.
But it's okay. It's if it's biblical that I don't agree with her, I've got to really tell her, hey, well, you need to look at it. But if it's not, it's like, it's okay. What you think, so you're you, and as long as it doesn't disrupt the relationship, we're good. And I'm not going to be one of these people that say, well, you have to do and think the way I do and think because I'm your boss kind of thing. I don't agree with that.
Right, I agree.
So, but anyway, anything else?
Well, just to wrap up, it's a really exciting moment in history. Culture is shifting. The things that we love, and most Christians love the institution of marriage. Marriage is making a comeback. There's a new respect for marriage. I don't know if you've seen headlines lately, but there's a lot of headlines out there across all political viewpoints talking about there's a new respect for marriage. I believe it's an emerging marriage renaissance. I believe God is moving. And so the call for us is to see what's happening around us with fresh eyes. Be open to the idea that maybe your lived experience isn't helping you right now. Be open to the idea that God's a big enough God that he could bring marriage back, and look for the glimmers of hope that you might see. And as you do see them, speak positively in the lives of others as to the potential and possibilities. There is an incredible beauty and possibility for marriage.
And we he uses as a voice for him, we need to speak up. I mean, that's really, really important. Well, this is really good. Really good. I enjoyed this tremendously. Again, if you watch this program, I really encourage you to share this, if you will, And if you have any comments or any questions, just please write them down. If you want to contact Marriage Initiative, please do that as well. You'll see everything there on the YouTube. Thank you for joining us today. Everyone, you have a wonderful day. You have a wonderful week, and aloha.